Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are in the where I'm living right now. We've been in the middle of an evacuation warning for the fires that are nearby us in North California. But we haven't had an evacuation order, just a warning to let you know. So um, we hope we have an order during the class. So far, it's been okay. Anyway, I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to see you here. And I'm going to talk today about something that will really be helpful to you. You can help yourself, you can help family and friends, and you can help at least 10,000 other people with what you learn by the end of today's session. I guarantee you can help at least that many people just with the information that you'll have at the end of our session. So I'm going to switch your screen now to screen share. The screen share doesn't have audio, so you won't hear any audio or music coming from it. I call it, and I've called it this for a long time, the big balance, because it is such a big balance that we experience in so many different ways. And that is um, everywhere you look. Sorry, this is going, the slides are moving a little bit slower than I had anticipated. Here we go. When you see that word balance, what concepts first come to mind? And if you're like most other people, when I asked that question in the past, most people say, well, they had a kind of negative idea about balance. It was limitations. It was some kind of obstruction. It was a precarious kind of balance, you know, like a high wire act in the circus, where at any moment you're going to go off balance. So that's our usual view of balance. But actually, what we're talking about today, the big balance, is a much wider and gentler balance than that. If you step back and think about it for a moment, just about every level of life you can mention is all about taking on and letting go. Whether it's physical or mental or emotional, we're always taking on constantly and letting go. There's a balance between the two, and the more harmonious the balance, the healthier we tend to be in those three areas. Physically, we take on and then we eliminate through the bowels, through the kidneys, through the lungs, through the skin. We're eliminating all the time physically. Imagine if you could only live as long as it took for you to fill up your stomach and you never let go of whatever you consumed. Wouldn't last very long. So taking on and letting go physically, mentally, we're constantly taking on different ideas, different thoughts, and some of them stay with us for longer. Some of them leave us very quickly. But eventually, we let go of those as well in different ways as we come up with new ideas, new concepts, new things that inspire us even more than before. And emotionally, we're exposed constantly to different responses of inside ourselves and outside ourselves from others. And many people go to counselors or therapists because they've taken on so much emotionally and mentally that they're unable to let go of it. So a lot of counseling and therapy is designed to help a person identify what it is they want to let go of or they need to let go of. So life's all about taking on and letting go. I first started thinking about many, many decades ago when I had a wonderful college teacher. She was an English composition teacher, and turned out she was a Benedictine nun from a little farm in Missouri. She was a very solid person. And she's the one who first said to me, life's all about taking on and letting go. And I never forgot that. So we want to create a balance there between everything we're taking on. This is what I call the big balance. And that's between consumption and elimination. Normally, we think of food as the food we eat through our mouth. But in the big balance view, food is seen with a capital F. You can say it's a bigger view of food, a bigger view of consumption. But we can use the human face to get a good sense of that. Obviously, we take in protein and fat and carbohydrates and vitamins from our food through our mouth. And that's not the end of it, though. We go up a little bit higher on the face yet. And what do we find? Our nose, we consume oxygen. And the food that we take in through our mouth is, we can't use it if we don't take in oxygen through our nose. So the kind of oxygen we consume, the kind of environment, the kind of, whether it's polluted air or clean air and so on, humid air, all the different types of oxygen environments are feeding us each in its own way. But it doesn't end with the oxygen in the nose. We go up a little bit higher yet on the face, and we come to the ears. And there we take in or we consume a different kind of food in the form of sound waves. Imagine right now all the sounds you're used to hearing suddenly were taken away from you. You couldn't hear the voices of people. You couldn't hear the voices of people you know and love. You couldn't hear the danger sounds, the warning sounds of vehicles and you're trying to cross the street or make a turn in your car. You hear the sounds coming and it warns you. This always reminds me, makes me think of long ago in the 1970s, that first Jaws movie, you know, about the sharks. And I remember sitting there in the theater, and of course, you know, you're in the theater, you know, you're not in the ocean, but you know, by the sound of the soundtrack, the sound waves coming into your ears, oh, here comes a shark attack. And you start, without realizing it, grabbing hold of your seat, your armchair a little tighter, and your heart's beating a little bit faster just by the change of the sound of the music and the soundtrack of the movie. So sound waves come into us and they nourish us and they affect us in so many different ways. But it doesn't stop there. Go up even higher on the face and we come to light waves. All the different things we see, all the colors, all of that. Imagine if suddenly you didn't have that, what you're used to seeing. And even when we eat food, meals, we'd see it before we eat it. So how the food looks is important. The look on the adults' faces as we're growing up as little children, you know, whether there's kindness in their eyes and on their face to the teachers and so on, or, you know, a mean look and so on. We take all of that in. So much so that when I've worked with people over the years, there are oftentimes people in elderly people in their 80s and 90s, and I'll say, what was your favorite food when you were 5 years old? And they kind of struggle with remembering what that might have been. But then when I say, what can you remember something that someone said to you when you were 5 years old, or something you saw when you were 5 years old? And many, many times they will burst into tears because they immediately remember something they saw or something they heard. So that's how important that kind of nourishment is to us through our eyes and our ears. But it doesn't stop there. We also take in through our skin. Our skin has many different kinds of receptors that are affected to pick up on whether it's hot or cold or the atmospheric conditions and so on. Skin is always interacting with that. And we're taking in through our nervous system all the different influences that our skin receives. Even from the stars above and the moon. You may know people who work in emergency services, and if you ask them, is it true that when the full moon is about to be on the rise, do you really see an increase in calls and domestic violence and bleeding ulcers and things? They say, oh yes, we always prepare for the full moon because we see the difference in the activity that we have to deal with. So why is that? Because the energy in the atmosphere that the full moon's creating is part of us, is affecting us. We're within that atmosphere, and through our skin, nervous system, brain, it's having an influence. It's a kind of food for us. Some people notice that at different times of the moon cycle, they feel more energy or less energy or better or not as good. All of that coming from the change in the atmospheric conditions that we perceive through our skin and into the nervous system. But it doesn't stop there with the skin and the nervous system. Everything we take in is food for us. Just like we have a bigger view of food, we can also have a bigger view of elimination. So there's physical elimination through the bowels and urination, exhalation, perspiration. We know that. But there's also emotional, psychological, thoughts, other types of elimination like artistic activities, sexual activity, everything that comes from within us and goes to the outside, you can consider to be a type of elimination from us. It's all coming from within us and going outward. So there's a big view of elimination that's important to understand. Behavior, for example, today many parents and teachers, they wonder, why is there all this behavior problem in the children and attention disorders and so on? But behavior is a direct expression outwardly of what's been consumed inwardly, physically, our food, mentally, and emotionally. All of that is expressed outwardly in behavior, in what we've eaten, what we've read, what we've been told, who raised us, what we've seen, the movies and TV, childhood environment in which we were raised, the geographical environment we lived in, the culture we've grown up in. All of the above and more has been consumed and is directly reflected in our outward behavior in various subtle and often not so subtle ways. So when we look at the behavior or any type of elimination, we can get a sense of what preceded that in terms of the various types of consumption, because those are reflected there in the elimination in the behavior. This is something not commonly understood, but I call this the big balance game. And just like a game, it has some rules that it plays by. So if you ask, what's the thing children do when they get together to create a new game? What do? They create rules. Well, why is that? Children hate rules. Why would they create rules when they're making a game? But if you've ever watched them playing together some new game that they've made up, they say, well, let's, you can only go so far. You can only throw the rock this far. And if so on and so forth. And that becomes the rules of their made up game. And why do we like the rules? Why have them? Because rules guide the game. They make it more fun to play. Have you ever been at a spectator sport that you knew nothing about? And if you didn't know the rules and skills necessary to play the game, it just seemed hard to follow, boring. But once you learn something of the rules of the game, it becomes clearer and easier to follow. When I was in junior college, I had a friend from Mexico, and he loved to play soccer. And sometimes I would go with him to his soccer practices and his soccer team games. And I didn't grow up with soccer. I didn't understand how it worked. And I would easily get bored and distracted. And finally, he gave me a book about it, and I read it, and he explained some things about it to me as well. And I started to understand some of the rules of it and some of the skills required. The next time I went to the game of soccer, I could appreciate it a lot more because I understood some of the rules. So in the big balance game, we have some rules. Everything consumed must eventually get eliminated, sooner or later. For example, some of the food we eat, eventually, fairly quickly, within 12 to 24 hours, gets eliminated, the fiber and so on. But not all of the food got eliminated immediately. A lot of it got digested, absorbed, assimilated, and became our cells, and tissue, and organs, and so on. But eventually, all those cells die off, go out, get eliminated, and are replaced. So everything we consume must eventually get eliminated. Remember, life's about taking on and letting go both. And next, the quality and nature of the consumption will directly influence the quality and nature of the elimination. So what's in the elimination is a reflection of what was the consumption. We can get some sense of it. So we can look at urination, we can look at bowel movement, we can get a perspiration, if there's perspiration, odor, breath odor, these types of things, these types of eliminations, we can get a sense from their nature, their quality, their character, what was consumed to create that kind of elimination variation. Next, when the consumption overwhelms the capacity for elimination, internal accumulation begins. We know this most commonly in the process of gaining weight, right? A person consumes more calories than he or she can burn up, and the body has to do something with them, so it converts them into fat cells and stores them in the body, various places, and the weight goes up. But there are plenty of other ways that we gain, which we'll talk about in a moment. So to give the body the opportunity to lose any accumulation, the origin of that accumulation must be identified, the contributing factors minimized or discontinued, and the big balance restored between consumption and elimination. So back to the weight gain issue. If somebody who's gained weight wants to lose weight, they have to sit back and go, well, the ice cream twice a day and no exercise, sedentary lifestyle, and this and that, all these other things, these are probably the contributing factors leading to this weight gain. So I'm going to stop those. I'm going to move some more, do a little more exercise and go on this routine and try and lose the weight. And sure enough, if they do it properly and they give their body the opportunity, it removes the accumulation of the weight. And now they're happy they've lost the weight. The accumulation no longer needs to be there. So this is a very simple understanding, really. But if you look at US consumption patterns, this one, I could only find one that goes to 2005. There are a couple of more recent ones I'll show here in a moment. But you look at all the per person consumption per year, red meat, beef, all these things, look all the way over 2005 column, and you see, you know, that's in pounds, I believe. All those different things are being consumed. Look at dairy products per person in 2005 was 600.5 pounds. Fats and oils, butter, shortening, lard, all of that consumption is taking place. And there's more. There are all these different charts, you know, that we can look at, and they're really interesting. And another one come up here. So all these different, you know, all the different communication, all the different consumption patterns. But that, I want to go back to that. Let's see. Well, what it showed was just a chart that, hang on a second. It's going ahead of me. What that showed was a pie chart that just illustrated those different consumption patterns on a daily basis. And again, just like in that yearly consumption chart that was up there, the dairy products are the biggest category, the biggest consumption in the US. Hundreds and hundreds, you know, of pounds a year, and I forget how many grams a day, but it's a huge amount. So all of that's coming in. All of that's happening to us. And then we've got to eliminate that. Remember, everything we consume must eventually get eliminated. Fortunately for us, the body does a miraculous job of eliminating most of it, but it can't eliminate all of it. Pretty soon it becomes overwhelmed. So we have what I call the super 6 organs of elimination. We have the lungs, they're constantly eliminating. You know, the lungs, if we look, we can find some interesting trivia about the lungs. I'm a trivia buff. I like to look up trivia about whatever it is I'm studying. Did you know that you have a tennis court inside of you? If you took your lungs and they were open flat, they'd be the size of a tennis court. They're that compact with all the little alveoli and so on. 70% of your body's waste is eliminated by the lungs daily. They're our main waste eliminator. We eliminate, we exhale 20,000 times a day. Imagine if you had to urinate or have a bowel movement 20,000 times a day. There'd be no life. You couldn't live. So very fortunately for us, nature lets us get rid of the 70% of our waste through our lungs. We can go around breathing and exhaling, getting rid of waste, and still walk around, live our lives, and do things because our lungs are doing most of the waste elimination for us. So there's small air sacs within the lungs where gas exchange occurs. They're known as alveoli. And there are about 300 to 500 million of them in the adult lungs. That's why we can spread our lungs out and flatten them out and make a tennis court. Another thing many people don't know, I didn't know at one time, the lungs don't move on their own. They don't beat like a heartbeat on its own through its own effort, its own muscle activity. The lungs don't move on their own. They require the diaphragm muscle, which is like you can say an open umbrella, a dome in our lower abdominal area, below our ribs. That diaphragm muscle has to flatten out, move down. And when that happens, there's space made in the abdominal cavity, so the lungs expand and fill with air. Otherwise, the lungs are just a tissue hanging there in the cavity. They don't move on their own. So the diaphragm is an important part of respiration and the lungs' ability to help us, right? And we also eliminate, as it says here, lungs, we eliminate about half a cup of water from our lungs per hour. You know, if you've ever gone up to a frosty or cold window and you exhale on it, then you see the moisture from your breath on the window. But normally we don't think much about moisture, water coming out through our lungs, but we get rid of about a half a cup of water per hour through our lungs. So they do all these different things that we may not be aware of. The primary function of the lungs is to move fresh air into the body while removing waste gases out. If we don't remove the waste gases, and what are the main waste gases? Carbon dioxide. And if carbon dioxide elevates too high in our body, it becomes poisonous to us. And it's very acidic. So the lungs are also key in helping our body maintain acid-alkaline balance. Another one of the super six organs of elimination is the large intestine. For years and years and years, you know, many people, we thought, oh, the large intestine is just into this useless end of the digestive tract that really doesn't do much. It's not all that important. And if you can remove it by surgery and still be alive, well, it must not be that significant or important. Well, since then, we've discovered the true importance of the large intestine, even if it can be removed from the body, and how significant it is to our overall health. You know, the entire digestive system is about, what, 27 feet long. The colon, the large intestine, at the end is 5 feet long. So you see here in the little illustration to the lower right, the green part, the large intestine, surrounds the wound up, compacted small intestine there in your abdominal cavity. So if you wanna massage yourself over your large intestine, just go around the periphery of your abdominal area where there aren't any bones, and then under your ribs, go across. And then once you get to then go down on the right side, and you've just now gone over the area of your large intestine. In the middle is your small intestine. Inside your large intestine lives approximately 100 trillion microbes. And lo and behold, they found out there's a purpose to those 100 trillion microbes. And so now we have more and more studies and interest focusing on our microbiome, right? And our colon also absorbs water as the food waste passes through there. One of the last things that happens to it is the colon absorbs water and some mineral salts that might be remaining there, and it brings it back into the body. So we don't lose it. We can use it if it gets reabsorbed. So it's an important organ of elimination, this colon. And its main job is basically, we want to eliminate waste so that we stay able to let go. It's part of the letting go. You know, I know I've read some books, I've studied with some teachers, some psychologists and so on who understand and make a connection between the body and emotional states and emotional patterns and so on. And they've often told me in different ways, but basically the same conclusion, that individuals who have a hard time letting go emotionally or mentally, they often have a weak function of elimination in the large intestine. It's not functioning in an optimal way. So it's not allowing them to let go physically as easily. And therefore it's affecting how their ability to let go emotionally and mentally as well. Then we have the kidneys. The amazing kidneys. And I was very fortunate. I got to study with the macrobiotic kidney wizard. He really believed strongly in the importance of the kidneys and keeping them healthy for all kinds of reasons, our overall health in general, so on. Herman Ihara. He became mainly interested in the kidneys, I believe, because of their role in maintaining the body's internal acid-alkaline balance, or pH balance, which he considered to be key for many health issues. So each kidney has some interesting trivia facts. Each one is the size of a fist. They're not huge. About 4.5 inches in length and 1.5 inches thick. And they contain about 1.5 million blood filtering units called nephrons. These are very important. They're very delicate tissue, these nephrons. It's stretched out. They're 5 miles, 8 kilometers long. That's a lot of nephrons. And of course, we know the kidneys create urine from urea, water, and other waste products. But they reabsorb and redistribute 99% of the blood volume throughout the body. And they're filtering about 45 gallons of blood each day. Again, like I mentioned, they help to regulate acid-alkaline balance. They only weigh an adult, each kidney, about 5 ounces or 142 grams. Every 30 minutes, your kidneys filter your entire blood supply. That's 45 times daily. The entire blood supply is circulating through your kidneys and being filtered. And the kidneys, while they're filtering the blood, they're taking all kinds of weather reports of the blood, the mineral content. Is there too much sodium? I better let some out. Is there too much potassium or not enough? I better reabsorb some of that instead of letting it out. They're always aware of what's in the blood. They're very sensitive to what needs to be let out and what needs to be reabsorbed. When the skin and liver are unable to do it, this is something many of us don't, I didn't know this. When the skin and liver are unable to do it, the kidneys trigger the production of vitamin D. Another thing, it's not well known, the kidneys produce a hormone called EPO, which prompts the bone marrow to make red blood cells. So if the kidneys are weak, or even worse, there's chronic kidney disease, it's very common to have kidney-associated anemia because the hormone isn't being properly produced to trigger the production of red blood cells, in this case, in the bone marrow. Also not well known is that the kidneys contribute to the blood sugar regulation. By how they affect glucose, reabsorption of it or letting it out. You know, in diabetes, for example, sometimes referred to as hyperglycemia, there's too much glucose in the blood. One of the reasons is the kidneys become weak. They can't let it out. They can't regulate it properly. And also the kidneys have been found to be important to the immune system. So really, you know, no organ in the body is in an isolated state. It's all interrelated. And the kidneys are definitely interrelated with so much that goes on in the body. In Chinese medicine, it's said that the kidneys rule over the bones. Well, in modern medicine too, they know the kidneys have an influence on the bones. And also in Chinese medicine, they say the kidneys and the brain, the kidneys have an influence on the brain. So they see the kidneys as a significant factor in memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and so on. So to summarize that, the main job of the kidneys, remove waste and extra fluid. They control blood pressure, make red blood cells, contribute to making red, keep the bones healthy, control the pH levels. You know, without properly controlled pH levels, the immune system can't work properly. White blood cells, immune cells, are dependent on a healthy acid-alkaline balance, pH balance in the body. They don't do so well when the body fluid becomes acid, especially the tissue fluid. That's the water around the cells. When it becomes a little acidified, the cells don't function properly. The enzymes don't function properly, so on. So here we have the super 6 organs of elimination: the skin, the 2 lungs, large intestine, 2 kidneys. That's 6 total. The skin came up earlier and bypassed too quickly. But it's the largest organ we have, the skin. It's amazing. You know, every 28 days, your skin is completely replaced. It looks like the same skin you always had, the same freckles, it's still there in the same place, but the skin itself has been completely replaced in 28 days. And we lose about 9 pounds of dead skin cells each year. So multiply that by 80 years. How many pounds is that? That's a lot of dead skin cells. And there's some gross kind of trivia about the skin. Some researchers estimate that half of all dust in a household is dead skin cells. And at any given moment in the Earth's atmosphere, there's about 1 billion ton, 1 billion, I forget if it's tons or pounds, but anyway, a lot of dead skin cells in the Earth's atmosphere. So it's constantly being sloughed off. Not only humans, but if you have pets around and in the house, their skin cells are sloughing off too. And within an inch of skin, there's like millions and millions and millions of cells, 30 million or something, and all kinds of sweat glands. The skin is just amazing. And it has 3 layers. The top layer, the dermis, and then the next layer underneath it, the epidermis. That's where most of the tremendous blood supply that comes to the skin is found, in the epidermis. And hair follicles, their roots there, so on. And then below the epidermis, deeper down, is a 3rd layer, the subcutaneous tissue layer, sometimes referred to as adipose tissue, and that's mainly fat cells. So everybody has these 3 layers to their skin. Depending on what kind of fat a person consumes in their diet, the layer of fat under the skin will be influenced by that. So if a person's eating a lot of harder type fat as their main form of fat, then the fat under the skin is going to be influenced by that hard fat. And it'll be a harder kind of layer of fat under the skin with the potential of blocking it off more, blocking off the pores. Most dry skin is not coming from the surface. As one time I heard a dermatologist on a radio talk show, and he said, well, we used to think that, you know, if you just put oils on the skin and lubrication, and this would be, you know, helpful to dry skin. And he said, but actually, we discovered that it wasn't the surface that was so much the problem. It was the underneath fat layer in the skin was becoming such that it was blocking off the lubrication to the surface of the skin through the sweat glands, oil glands, etc. The skin was drying out. So pay attention to what's underneath the skin. Another interesting thing about the skin, when some of the other organs of elimination are weak, not functioning optimally, the skin is often called upon to do some of the elimination that they can't do. Now, I don't mean that urine goes out through the skin or intestinal waste matter or that type of thing, but oftentimes various acids and so on that the lungs and kidneys can't properly deal with, they may come to the skin area and settle in there hoping to get out there. But if the skin is already blocked, then all of that waste just kind of settles into the layers under the skin and doesn't really get out. So the human body has a natural design. It wants to be free and clear of obstruction, accumulation, inflammation, pain, fatigue, infection, inflexibility, disease. All these things that in the modern world we've come to just accept as inevitable. Of course we age, right? But we can age in a healthy way, in a natural way. But we've come to accept all of this stuff that's going on in our bodies as just to be expected. You know, many people get the idea from wherever, the medical world or teachers or wherever, that the body is an imperfect machine, that if the scientists could have only been asked to design the body, they could have designed it much more efficiently. The body is an imperfect machine that is destined to let us down eventually. It's destined to betray us. So when the health problems come, or the arthritis or heart disease, whatever it might be, oftentimes on the unconscious or conscious level, a person might think, well, I was told that eventually, you know, my body would betray me and give up on me, so I guess that's what's happening. And we accept it, the diabetes, etc. Another part of the human body's natural design is it consume and eliminate naturally. To support us the whole of our lives, not just while we're young, but the whole of our lives. To be healthy, the word healthy comes from the ancient Anglo-Saxon word hale, H-A-L-E. hale, which means whole. So our body wants to support its wholeness, the wholeness of our lives, not betray us. So if we think of a children's playground seesaw and the balance, on either end we have the extremes, and in the center we have the balancing point. And we put on here the consumption and elimination that we just talked about. Look, the consumption is like the big kid on the seesaw. You can't have any balance. There's the little kid of the elimination on the other end. The elimination is very limited. We think the consumption is unlimited. So we go on about our ways in the modern society, not realizing that what we can eliminate it's limited. And that gets overwhelmed eventually. So, like I mentioned before, when consumption exceeds elimination, the body has one choice: accumulation. It can't do anything else but that. So these are some of the most common areas of accumulation in the body: the ears and the sinuses. People get lots of earwax buildup and they just think, or they're told, hey, I'm just one of those people that produces a lot of earwax, I guess. Or the sinus congestion. I'm just one of those people that gets blocked sinuses. It's what I have to deal with. But those areas are getting accumulations for a reason. The breast area. Here's the passageways and compartments leading to the outside of the body. The body thinks, hey, maybe I could get something out through here. The organs of elimination aren't doing me a 100% full job. I'll send some of this stuff to these other areas. Maybe it can get out there. But these areas, the ear, the sinuses, the breast, these are not active organs or functions of elimination. So stuff tends to come there and just get stuck. And then lower down in the body, the uterus, the ovaries, all of this area is this is leading to the outside of the body. Any place where there's a passageway to the outside of the body can read it as a potential for elimination, getting something out. And so it might send stuff there that normally wouldn't go there, but mucus and cysts and so on start to build up. And in men, the prostate gland area is a common site of accumulation, swelling, etc. It goes on and on. So we have natural cells and excessive body cells. The body has a natural cell environment. Those cells know what to do. They know where they belong. They interact with other cells. This is a natural environment. The body produces them as they're needed, these cells, not in excess. And they belong to the organized organism. They know where they're supposed to be. The hair cells are in the hair, the eye cells are in the eye, the liver cells are in the liver, the bone cells are in the bones. They do their job, they interact, they're team players, they contribute. These natural cells are produced in proper quantity from the necessary raw materials from our food: protein, carbohydrate, vitamins, minerals, so on. But when we take raw materials from food in excess of what the body needs to produce normal cells, it's triggered to produce an excess of cells. Cells can't be produced by anything other than the raw materials the body uses to produce cells. So fat cells don't just appear out of nowhere. Amyloid plaque in the brain of dementia, Alzheimer's patients doesn't just suddenly appear out of nowhere. It has to have their cells. They have to have raw materials. So where there are excess cells being produced in the body and creating accumulations and blockages, that's an immediate sign that extra nourishment from food is being taken and the body's producing those extra cells and accumulations from that raw material. There are many ways the body will produce extra cells besides fat cells, and not all accumulation is internal. So you just take a look at all these ways externally and some internally that the body shows signs of producing extra cells, cysts, warts, moles, intestinal polyps, all kinds of kidney stones, nasal polyps, gallstones. All of these things are made from cells. And all of these things have no purpose in the body. They just accumulate and cause problems in many cases. But they're being produced because the body uses extra nourishment to produce these extra unwanted, unneeded, unnecessary, sometimes painful, sometimes obstructive cells, polyps, cysts, warts, lumps, all kinds of things. This is nasal polyps there. It's not something you often see, but what's nasal polyp come from? It comes from all the raw materials necessary to produce cells, and styes, eye styes, and on and on. These don't just appear out of the blue. The body has to produce them from raw materials. So, detoxing the big balance way. There's a lot of talk today about detox, and people, it's like toxins in the body are barnacles on the boat, and you want to flush them out with harsh types of treatments and flushing programs and so on. But the best way to detox is to strengthen the 6 organs of elimination. So to improve the body's functions of elimination, reflect on the consumption pattern. One of the things that I didn't mention before that often happens, is found in the skin, is the skin is a place where heavy metals accumulate in the body, in the fat cells. Fat cells are like environmental pollutant barrels. Pollutants store in fat cells. So heavy metals are found accumulating in fat cell. One of the best things you can do for heavy metals in the fat cells is to take deep skin sauna, like far infrared sauna. Most regular saunas don't penetrate to the fat cell layer, 3 layers down. Most saunas just penetrate to the surface of the skin, but far infrared saunas have been shown to penetrate down to the fat cells and help in eliminating heavy accumulations in those fat cells. So we want to restore the skin, the lungs, the large intestine, the kidneys to their natural healthy ability. You know, the body has the ability to nourish itself and cleanse and detox itself all at the same time. But today's view is, modern view is, you just gum yourself up, then you go on a detox program or a fast. Then after the detox program or fast is over, you go back to the way you you lived and ate before, and you gum yourself up again, and now a few months later you do another detox, that kind of idea, right? But actually a more balanced way is to support the organs of elimination so that because they're what detox us. And you can't just flush them out like you flush barnacles off of a boat. You have to restore their proper elimination and the function that they do naturally. And they'll eliminate, they'll detox, they'll take care of us. So this is an overview, an introduction to the big balance way of consumption and elimination. What questions do you have? Let me go back here to get down to share the screen.
So David, we have, how can I increase adipose tissue and help improve thin, dry skin?
Right. Now, what was the first part? What kind of tissue? Dry?
Help to increase the adipose tissue and skin layer and help improve thin, dry skin.
Oh.
So for like a lot of us ladies, as we get older after menopause, the skin starts getting thinner and thinner.
Right. Yeah.
What can we do to help that out?
So what I've seen over the years in people is they really have to look diet. If we're talking about diet food, to look at what kind of carbohydrates are they consuming. Now, a lot of times people think they're eating really healthy, but then over the years they're taking lots of smoothies and fruit juices and banana tofu, whatever blends, and lots of sugary things, and even the designer health food store sugars now that are in popular use, the coconut sugars and the date sugars and the palm sugars and so on, as well as the other sugars and syrups and so on. What kind of carbohydrates are you consuming? And what kind of simple carbohydrates are you consuming? That's especially most important. Simple, refined carbohydrates, number one. And number two, the kind of oil. If a person's on a no oil or very, very, very low oil diet for whatever reason, either because the concept is popular or they've been told to or they've just decided to, this often is an influence on hormonal factors, right? You know, the tiny gymnast, female gymnast, right? They put them on what? A low fat diet. So their hormone production will be delayed so that they'll stay young, they'll stay little, and so on. And growth hormones are suppressed for some of them, etc. But generally speaking, a proper quantity and quality of fat in the diet is necessary for proper hormone production, even post-menopausal.
We have another question. Please repeat the type of sauna for fat cells.
I'll type it here in the chat area. It's called far infrared.
And then we have another question. Why is smoked fish on the list of foods not favorable to eat?
On my list or in someone else's list?
David, do you want to unmute yourself and ask David Briscoe directly? We got two Davids here.
Yes, David, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, David.
Hi, it was on one of your charts. It was on the side that had egg and meat, and
Oh, oh.
it was on that chart, and it hit me. Why is smoked fish on there? There must be a reason. Do you know which chart I'm talking about, David?
Well, was that the charts of per capita consumption from the USDA, like how many pounds per year of meat and eggs and that type of thing?
It was your chart. I don't remember.
Oh,
I remember it was at the end of the presentation where the intake, the consumption was heavier than the elimination.
oh, okay, on the balancing bar.
Yes.
Right.
Mm.
Because well, first of all, if a person's going to take smoked fish, find out what smoked it. How's it been smoked? Has it been artificially done or naturally done? Or what are the smoking factors? I mean, there are some studies out that show smoked foods generally, fish, meat, bacon, what have you, anything smoked tends to have a tendency toward becoming more carcinogenic than non-smoked foods. Also, from a macrobiotic perspective, through macrobiotic eyes, smoking fish would make it even more of a yang food than fish unsmoked. So some people consider that hard to balance regular consumption of smoked fish. So that's why it's there.
Yeah, it just seemed a little odd. It stood out as it didn't seem to fit
Right.
without explanation, but that's okay. I just thought maybe there was something I wasn't aware of. That's all right, David.
Well, any food that's concentrated in protein, fish, meat, chicken, cheese, eggs, these are all known to be very acid forming because of the amino acids that are rich in sulfur in protein. So the more concentrated the protein is, the more acid forming the food is going to be after it's consumed. That's another reason it's in that list.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and I don't want to take up too much time because the time is almost up. Do you eat fish, David, or do you mainly eat beans instead? How often do you personally eat fish, you and your wife?
Gosh, we don't even think about, we don't have any. It's Thursday, it's the third Friday of the month, let's have some fish. Mostly we would eat beans and plant proteins primarily. Yeah, so if sometimes family members get a craving for some fish, and we might get some or go out and have some, but how often would that be?
It depends on what we've been doing, like
Yeah,
the level of activity.
I don't know.
And what type would it be if you do?
Oh, usually some type of white meat fish.
Okay.
We live like 2 blocks away from one of the California's richest salmon fishing rivers, the Feather River. We're not, and we don't promote exclusively a vegan diet. In my view, macrobiotics was not meant to be exclusively anything, but to learn how to choose from among the foods that are available to us what we need now for whatever reason we decide it's going to serve us a certain purpose. And that way, to me, it becomes more of a creative and dynamic way of choosing your food rather than purely conceptual or, for, other reasons. So what I look at is when I'm helping somebody with their diet, I'm looking at what is going to help this person the best. What's going to help them get the most energy, vitality, to do what they want to do, to be what they want to be, to have the health that they want to have. I'm also considering you know, ecological, environmental factors and so on. So, you know, plant-based foods has always been the 99% of the focus of most macrobiotic ways of eating, right?
Yes.
You have one last question, David,
Uh-huh.
which is what specific foods contribute to excess earwax?
Oh, have you ever taken, um, maybe you, at some point in your life, you left out a hunk of cheddar cheese all night and forgot about it, or for 2 days and forgot about it, and came back and the edges of it are all dry? That kind of food creates extra earwax. Now there's harder earwax, and softer accumulations of waxiness in the ears. So if you can stick your little finger just right there inside your ear, and if you feel and pull it out and you feel it's real waxy on the end and sticky, that might be a worthwhile indicator that you might be having a tendency to overdo it on nut butters and tahinis and vegan cheeses and those types of oily things. So harder earwax is more from harder type of dairy foods, basically. And maybe in some cases, too much bread, baked flour, some kind. It's a very common thing, people getting ear blockages, right? So first thing I suggest is they try ear candling. See if that helps them.
What about little kids that get ear infections?
Yeah.
It's more of a watery kind of.
Right. Well, when
excess.
we send Cynthia here, Cynthia Briscoe's asking about children and ear infections. When we first moved here, we're living in the same house. It'll be 30 years this January. And when we first moved here, this neighborhood was full of little children. Now those families have all grown up and moved away. But, you know, so we got to know a lot of those children because we had little children. And many of them had chronic ear infections. So if we had our little kiddie pool out, they had to, their parents said, well, don't let them go under the water. They don't want to get water in their ears. They have tubes in their ears or ear infections and so on. And we kept hearing that from many different kids. It's almost like the whole neighborhood. Kids had ear problems, ear infection problems. But what did they like to eat the most? Sugar, candy, milk products, mainly those things.
Cereal.
Cereal with milk and sugar and you know, cornflakes, sugared frosted flakes and bananas, and really thought of as, you know, they were eating healthy, right? But many of them had ear infections. Chronic. The number one surgical procedure, it used to be among small children in the United States, used to be tonsillectomy, right? We, every kid when I was 7 years old looked forward to their rite of passage, going to the hospital and having their tonsils taken out. So you could have the nice, pretty nurse come in your room with the little cardboard, a container of vanilla ice cream with the flat wooden spoon, because you couldn't swallow anything. And I thought, gee, this is great. Why can't I have this surgery more than once, right? But now, after a while, after some years, they kind of went, oops, wait a minute. They discovered the tonsils are part of the immune system. And they're, you know, lymphoid tissue, some kind. And so they stopped doing routine tonsillectomies, only in real serious cases now. But the number one surgery among small children in the US is the tubes in the ears that drain because they have chronic ear infections. But if they understood, if you could teach them, if I could teach them about this big balance understanding that the ear is trying to use the body's trying to use the ear's storage capacity. It's not meant to be storage, but it's, you know, little places in there, compartments, and its passageway to the outside as a potential for getting rid of excess accumulation. Just think how many children could be helped. Thousands upon endless numbers. Just from that. So simple. It's so simple that it seems simplistic. And, you know, and people might say, well, what could you possibly know? We got billions of dollars of research going on here, and we still haven't figured it out.
Okay, David, one really quick question because we need to close out the session and I gotta turn over the helm to the next one. It was just one last question. Do bananas contribute to earwax as well?
No, if it sounded like I said that somewhere along the presentation, I didn't mean that, no. But
Okay.
the sugar and dairy food, including fruit sugar, fructose is a simple sugar, right? Not a complex sugar. Simple sugar combined with milk, protein, and fat, and milk hormones. You know, even if you buy organic milk, it's still got the cow's growth hormones in it and other things.
What about like soy milk or nut milks?
Well,
combined with
Cynthia's asking about soy milk, nut milk, things. If kids who are on a healthy diet or plant-based diet or vegan diet are eating lots of soy dairy substitutes, soy cheeses, nut milks, hemp milk, almond milk, combined with sugar, because many people on a vegan diet eat lots of sugary things. It's not excluded necessarily as a then they have issues too. I see as many basically people on a vegan diet with health issues as I do people not on a vegan diet.
Well, thank you very much for your time in class today, David. That was excellent. And yes, there will be a recording of this with the questions and answers at the end attached to the session as well. Class recordings are replacing classes on the schedule as they become available. Thank you, David and Cynthia. Great class.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.
No hurry. No worry.